Yeah, I think, like for everyone, it's been a year of crisis. The world has turned upside down, and it has really showed people that we are very vulnerable. I think people have overestimated our ability to be resilient, and it has really shown that we are very vulnerable, and we are not living sustainably, and we need to maybe rethink the way we see ourselves and our societies, and it has really proved that we are not living sustainable, and that we can't predict everything, that sometimes things that we can that no one had seen before comes up and just turns everything around. It has been just one crisis upon the next crisis upon the next crisis. And I mean, of course, small things have happened and people have started to speak up and say, like, yeah, we're really doing everything that we can and we are so good. But if you look at the reality, that shows that really almost nothing has been done. And the climate crisis is still not being treated as a crisis. So no. I just think that it's funny because it shows that they have really nowhere left to go. They have to start attacking children because they have no arguments left. And they are so desperate not to talk about the climate crisis because they know that if they talk about the climate crisis, they don't have any valid arguments. They just can't ignore it anymore because we have passed some kind of point where it becomes too absurd. So they just try to focus on something else, and attacking children is a very efficient way of focusing on something else. I think that can be very frustrating because it shows that the message is not getting through. I mean, we are not doing this to get praise or for people to tell us that they really admire what we do and for people to take selfies with us. But we are doing this because we want to see actual change, and people don't seem to understand that. So I guess that just shows how far we have left. I think from all the people involved with this movement, especially young people that are involved and who together we keep our spirits up. Of course, my family and my dogs, but also the knowledge that this is something that is so important. I can't allow myself to give up, but we have to keep going because, otherwise I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, so we have to do everything in our power to try to improve the world, to use this time that we have to use our platforms. Yeah, I mean, of course, we have to look at the responsibility, the historical responsibility of the accumulated carbon emissions, and also because some countries have been contributing more than others, and of course then they have a bigger responsibility. And also in the Paris Agreement, richer countries have actually signed up to lead the way, to give developing parts of the world a chance to be able to heighten their standard of living. In some parts of the world, we have built up our infrastructure, and by that using fossil fuels and emitting CO2, and of course that accumulates to something, and that needs to be taken into account when we talk about responsibilities. And to also look at the carbon emissions per capita. And that of course shows that different people have different responsibilities and should be held more accountable than others. Yeah, I mean, we can see all over the world now people trying to have to use the term green in order to justify their actions, like the Green Deal or Green New Deal or green investments or whatever. Green, I mean, green doesn't mean anything. I mean, green is just a color that we have chosen to in order to justify our actions, and so no one has actually decided on what green means. So it can mean anything. So and that of course is a big loophole when people say like we have this Green Deal, we are gonna do green investments, then that doesn't really mean anything, and it just sounds very good. I mean, they're right, of course. As the system looks now, we can't just shut down our whole societies in order to be in line with the science. And that is why the climate crisis is a crisis. It's so complex because we need to find a way in order to do this so that it doesn't harm people. And that is a real challenge. And that's why we should have started this many decades ago. But also, let's have that in mind, that the earlier we start, the easier it will be. Yeah, of course, that is a huge problem. Many countries that are seen as leaders on the climate, who are actually villains, but that is not being reported on because people don't know these things, so these countries aren't held accountable. They are still seen as leaders, and they can do pretty much whatever they want, and they will not be held accountable. So I think this is a huge problem, and also that some other countries are being blamed for things that are actually being done and organized by countries or institutions that are seen as leaders. That is very unfair. I mean, I've never spoken out about party politics, and I avoid it to all costs, because the climate crisis is not about politics, it's beyond politics. But so are some other things, and I think the US election this year is something that is beyond politics. The line goes with Trump. Of course, like every other world leader, they should listen to and act on the science and treat the climate crisis like a crisis. And also, the US has a very special responsibility, since they are the richest country in the world, but also the country responsible for most accumulated carbon emissions. So that, of course, puts it in a different light, and they need to take that responsibility. I mean, I can't tell anyone else to do. That's not my responsibility, and I'm not responsible for other people's actions. If they choose to do something in order, if they choose to fly in order to, support me or whatever, then that is their choice. And I don't think I can be held responsible for that. But then also, I'm not stopped flying because I want to reduce my carbon footprint. It would probably be much more efficient if you look at it from in just a carbon way of aspect of it. If I flew around the world advocating for climate action, but I have chosen not to do that because I want to send a signal that we are in a crisis. Because if no one sends that message that we are in a crisis, and in a crisis you change your behavior, then people won't understand that we are in a crisis. So the goal with that wasn't to reduce my carbon footprint, but rather to start a debate. The journey was actually very, very relaxed. relaxing and very incredible. So because to just be isolated there in the ocean, be completely surrounded by and at the hands of nature, and it just felt so relaxing. Well, I mean, to the president, I mean, if he says that he admires what I do, then he better prove it. Because actions speak much louder than words.
Yes.
Yes. And to the young people, I just say that we need to stand united all over the world, because this issue affects all of us, even though it affects us differently and different amounts. We are still all impacted by it, and we need to stand in solidarity with each other and with those most affected, and because we won't achieve any changes if we are not united, and yeah, we need to understand that the older generations have failed us and that they are failing us, and we need to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
I was also like that in the beginning. I didn't want to face it because it was just too depressing and it was just so sad. And that made me feel like I couldn't do anything because it was just too big a problem. And in response to that, I just became inactive and depressed and didn't do anything. But what I didn't understand is that how to feel. The medicine for depression is to actually do something and to try to change things. And I think that many people fail to understand that it is actually those who are sensitive to this and who are criticizing and who are asking the uncomfortable questions, who are the optimists, who are the ones who will create change. Because if we don't feel for these issues, if we don't care about these issues, then we won't be able to change the things that are causing these things. And so if you can use that feeling to transform it into real action, then that will, at least it cured my depression. Well, I think I, as well as everyone else, was very surprised in how big the impact actually became. I don't think anyone could have predicted that, least of all me. So it came as a shock, that because I thought that people just didn't care, that young people were just selfish and we only care about ourselves. But then it showed that many young people were actually concerned about these things. They just didn't know how to use that feeling, how to transform it into something concrete. So, but then it feels like many found this and used it as a tool in order to express their concerns. So, and of course that is a big win, that people have started to take action, and people have, the level of awareness has increased, even though it's very far from enough. It has still increased. But it's still also, if you look at it from another perspective, then the climate crisis is still not being treated as a crisis, and the emissions haven't reduced. So yeah, and I'm very happy to be back in school, to have normal routines again. Yeah, there's a documentary about a guy who has been following me around for I think a year, and it just shows, my life, and focusing on the movement, and it comes out today in cinemas in many countries, but it differs from one country to another, so I don't really know. We always have time to do as much as we can, and there's not a magic date when everything is beyond saving, so we can always avoid things from getting worse. But it is these following months and years that are going to be crucial if we are to be able to stay below the safe levels that we have committed ourselves to. Well, I want people to take action to become aware of the climate crisis, try to understand what needs to be done.